And there's one building, and it's 2 stories high, but it was missing a rooftop. So it's half built, really. And when it rained, oh man, it got nasty. It got dirty. Everything came in. We had a lot of critters living in the, building.
Samonim, it is so nice seeing you. I don't actually remember the last time we had a conversation because it's been so long. I know pandemic was a large reason. I see Pastor Ben a lot. We had lunch, but I have not seen you in such a long time. It's so good seeing you.
Likewise. I know we need to catch up with you and Hannah. Thank you for having me. A little bit, the setup is so professional. Makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm here to talk to a good friend. So, okay, I'm trying to stay focused at that. Thank you.
I know. I was thinking you haven't even met our third daughter yet, Hollyana.
I know.
We got to really get together and have a meal.
Yes, sounds good. Let's do that.
Adam and Zach are so old now. I used to remember babysitting them. Zachary was on my back playing horsey. And Adam was playing with my Nerf blaster. And
oh my goodness.
My goodness, they're so big.
Yep. Junior in high school for Adam and 8th grader for Zach. They both outgrew me 2 years ago.
I know. I see those pictures. I'm like, they're so tall. What is the secret hanyak you're giving them? What is it? Tell me. I need to feed that to my kids.
I'll give you a list.
I'll buy it all. I'm a firm believer in hanyak now.
Oh, yes. It's good stuff.
Samani, when I think about Pastor Ben, we kind of refer to him as the godfather of pastors. But when I think about you, I don't think of you as the godmother because that has a different kind of a meaning. We think godfather because the movie, but I do kind of think of you as that samonim that's connected to all samonims. Almost when I talk to a samonim and some issues going on, I always think have you talked to Jen Samonim yet? Have you met with Jen Samonim yet?
It may be true for Ben, godfather, but not me. I'm just his wife and just, at the church scene and go to campus occasionally. But yeah, I wish I could do more. But one day at a time as God leads.
We're talking a lot about the beginning of the Korean American ministry and church and EM ministries. And I think your experience is extremely valuable because you were also part of that first wave of EM and Korean Americans. But what you actually have is you are part of actually the Korean church going to Korean speaking service. And you were actually there in that type of ministry as your church. And you transitioned from that into more English speaking.
Yes.
So I think that was around the 80s, the 1980s.
Yes.
What church did you kind of grow up first at? And I know you eventually got to CMC, but what church were you at growing up as a kid and in high school? And
our family immigrated to States 1980. And we started right off at LA OMC, 1980.
Oh, okay.
And so I was 8 at that time. And so kind of moving forward. And it was under Im Dong-seong 목사님, the founding pastor of LA OMC. And everyone but my dad went to church. So all 4 of us. And grew up there. And about 88, our father became a believer. So he decided to choose what church we will be attending. And around that time, our uncle became an ordained pastor. So we went to a family church plant, which was very tiny. And so we were there for a long time. And of course, no KM, no EM. And everything was Korean speaking, smaller dynamics. After that, having served at my uncle's church for quite some time, that was from my high school years. During my college years, I was running dry. So I had to step into a local church. And this was 1992. I decided to go to Chungyeon because it was in our backyard in Glendale. And Chungyeon was launching EM with Pastor Joshua Lee. And I was part of that ministry. And actually, Jeannie was there, who is now Jeannie Jan. Alex's wife.
Oh, you guys were at Chunyan together.
Yes.
What year was this?
This is 92.
92. And they
Yes.
just started an EM.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It was dynamic. In the fall of 92. And we served together in the worship team. And so it was a lot of fun, exciting. Wow, everything was done in English. I mean, at OMC, yes, we did have departments like junior high school department, elementary department, high school. Everything was done in English. But I don't know if there was anything specific for EM per se. But my first experience of English ministry was at Chunyan at that time. So that's how it started off.
What was that like? Because it sounds like you're saying at LAOMC, you attended the Korean service with the parents, all the adults there. Mm-hmm. What was that like attending Chunyan, having a service in English, getting preached to in English? What was that like for you?
I felt like there was connection. I felt like it meant something to me where I didn't have to second guess what they were saying in Korean because my Korean wasn't that excellent. I was 8 when I came, so not very fluid for me, but it was just, wow, I got to really worship God in the, arena where I was comfortable. Yeah. But at the same time at OMC, like Sunday schools, everything was done in English, but it was a lot of the teachers were not very fluent in English. So, it's broken English, but good enough for me to understand. And it was solid and they really loved us. Same thing with a junior high school. Changnonim was more comfortable in Korean, but he taught in English as well. And so that was my OMC life. But I did go to KM with my mom and for special occasions quite a lot. And so I was very familiar with the KM setting as well.
Were you in college when you were going to Chunyan?
Yes.
What school you were at?
I was at Long Beach State. Uh-huh. And after my sophomore year, starting junior year, I believe I started in the fall with Chunyan English Ministry. And it was fun. It was exciting because I did go to Glendale High School. So a handful of my, high school friends were there at the church and they grew up at the church. So that was exciting. But in the context of worship, fellowship, small group, that was a exciting time because majority of the EM was collegiates and few English-speaking, young adults were, there to just engage and to, support as well. But it was an exciting time because, Joshua Lee 목사님 was the pastor. And you may not know, but yes, he's phenomenal. And he made huge impact in KCM Circle too. So yeah, so excited to be there.
Where is Joshua Lee now?
I am not sure.
Okay.
I think he might be in Southern Cal. He was serving in Northern Cal at DKC, I believe. I'm not sure if he's still there or down here.
Okay.
Now. Mm-hmm.
So you're in college at Long Beach State. Was there like any campus ministries during that time? If there was, were you attending one?
Yes.
Okay.
Many campus ministry, but from what I was part of KCF, which is known as now, which is actually KCM. And so KCF was a place where it had already started in the 80s at Long Beach State. And a lot of the KCM pastors were coming in. And I actually got connected immediately my freshman year, and which is a ministry that Sang 목사님, Andrew Sak 목사님 had, founded. And at that time, a lot of our, time was just Wednesday fellowship. We call that Wednesday fellowship, which was worship. And then throughout the week, we had discipleship and we had, gatherings, we had prayer group and whatnot. And so I was part of, I think, all of that, even discipleship. And my first 2 years at KCF at Long Beach was that it fueled me. I like 김학진 목사님. He was 전도사님 back then. He was my first year KCM overseeing pastor. He spoke English, and yes, he did guide us. He also did our discipleship, which I was part of. Second year of our campus ministry pastor was Jimmy Han. And so it was
nice.
amazing. He was 전도사님 back then. So I had known Jimmy from a distance at OMC days and when he was doing taekwondo, but I actually got to engage with him, get to know him as my pastor, my second year in college, and he was also my discipler. And so that was an amazing time. And what I was fed at campus with campus ministry, I was able to take it back to my family church and serve and do Sunday school and teach Sunday school with however in a way that I was fed. So it was such a good place where campus ministry had a huge, powerful impact on me for college student, for me to give back to my church that way. So KCF was very, very impactful in my life.
Were you part of KCF when it was still Korean speaking, or did you join when it was already like in English and you had English speakers and stuff like that?
So 1990 was my first year of freshman year at Long Beach. And KCF at that time, I mean, we were called KCF, but UCLA still at that time was called KBS, Korean Bible Study.
Yeah.
And, you know, different campuses had different names. And at that time, more than UCs, there were more Cal State campuses. So with that, and then, the leaders, 전도사님s, they were very bilingual, but more comfortable in Korean, I would say. And that's when Pastor Jimmy kind of took the transition of kind of moving KCF and, you know, also bringing the name KCM together. That was a transitional time. And it became more English speaking after Jimmy had kind of like led the ministry in that direction. And by then, you know, the collegiates were more English speakers than, you know, Korean speaking anyway. So
when you were serving at LAOMC and then even at Chunghyun, actually I have to ask you a question. So you were born in Korea.
yes.
So do you consider yourself like a 1.5er or do you consider yourself like a second gen?
Maybe 1.75.
Yeah, I know. I know. People don't know. Some people say
Right?
1.8. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's still helpful. So when you were attending LAOMC and Chunghyun, did you ever feel the common barriers that first and second gen usually have, or were you a little bit more understanding because you still had like a very strong Korean heritage since you came here when you were 8 years old?
You know, I didn't think much of it. I just thought, you know, there are elders and this is one church. Yes, it's so nice. I felt like they were doing us a favor by allowing us to have that separate worship. So I had no complaints. It was a privilege. I'm like, we can come and worship among our peers and in the comfortable language. So I don't remember too many difficult dynamics or uncomfortable dynamics. And in fact, at LAOMC, I think I was too young to know the leadership dynamics. I was just very, very much of a happy camper. Just to be in worship, be with my friends, and, you know, be part of the church. Probably in Chunghyun, it was different. I was a little bit grown up, but I was appreciative of what was going on. And actually, at that time, Chunghyun leadership under 정상우 목사님, it was very supportive. They really wanted us to grow and flourish. And they really wanted to foster, you know, our intent of worship and what it meant for, you know, God to, you know, just be among us in our younger people. So yeah, it was amazing support we had at those times.
As a college student, just for you, did you have any relationship or interaction with the KM side, the Chanunims, or even any of the adults on the KM side?
A lot, actually.
Okay.
While I was, you know, part of English ministry, I also served in elementary, and then with Sandy 전도사님 at Chunghyun at that time, and then I worked with Pastor Nathan. He was doing middle school or junior high school. So I served in music for middle school. I served in Sunday school, and then eventually even high school in a short period of time because there was a need. And so with every department, there were also overseeing elders, deacons. So we worked with them quite a bit. But I think it was most prevalent when I ended up going to Guatemala missions with the church. And I had to really engage with the 장로님s, with the 전도사님 and whatnot. And so there was a lot of like what you're going to do on the field. And when we came back, we had to do a lot of presentations, even for KM. So there was a lot of dialogue. But yeah, it was a very supportive environment, which I really, really appreciate.
Unpack that for me, because you say you worked with all of them. You had a relationship, and you said they're very supportive. Describe that. How were they supportive to you? What made you feel supported? And it sounded like it was a good experience. So what was it that helped it create a good experience for you?
There was a time when I was serving in middle school. I was doing music with a friend named Chinte, and we're leading worship, but they needed more help. So I ended up doing a Bible study with a group of women, well, girls at that time, and just talking to them, sharing, and, Bible study as well. And then, I got to know some hardships one of the girls was going through. It was pretty serious with her family. And I felt very limited as a college student too. I couldn't go forward and help her very, personally. So I spoke to the overseeing 집사님, and he was very attentive, and he really, embraced her, and he said, "Okay, we'll take over from here." And so one of the few steps he did was he heard us out and heard her story, and then he really felt for her. I saw tears in his eyes, and then he prayed for her, and he goes, "Well, let's help. We're going to help you with this." And so that was an example of, oh, wow, we have a really good team dynamic here. Like, they really care for us. It's not, he was probably her father's age, but at the same time, he had the depth to really embrace her and to understand her pain and hurt at home. So all the details, I don't remember now, but I know that she was helped, and she continued to come to church, continued to be part of the small group. And I think she did well.
Wow, that's a great story. Great story.
Mm.
While you were at Chunghyun, you're in college. Did you go to CMC after Chunghyun?
Good one. No, I went to Chunghyun for 2 years, and because I told my pastor at the small family church, my uncle, I said, I need a break. I need to go be with my peers and worship in English. I can't go without worship for so long.
Yeah.
And because at that time, KCM was my only primary, but I felt more. I felt the need to have more. And so I did return after 2 years at Chunghyun. I went back to our family church, continued to serve. And thank God I still had KCM in my, access to receive the feeding and the fueling and so forth. And so from then, I continued to serve at the Sunday school level, middle school. I wasn't a 전도사, but I kind of functioned like one, and they called me director, education director. And with that, and every so often, it's such a small church. When the accompanist didn't show up, they would call me, and I would have to run in and, accompany the choir. So kind of my nickname at the church was Spare Tire.
Oh, no, that's
Right?
terrible. That's no good.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny, but, it's a small church and there's so much need, right? 개척교회. So that was pretty much, and from then on, having served there for a longer period of time, and it was time for me to move on as well. And best years were kind of given in that way, with a lot of passion and love for the Lord, in my probably purity in loving Jesus in that way. And over time, I did finish school, college, and then I ended up at CMC.
How did you go from there to CMC? What made you get you to CMC?
So at that time, I was seeking for a solid worship communities where I could worship and, grow in my faith, which would be, I don't know, whether it be Bible study and also fellowship, because I lacked fellowship at the small family church. And so I was really looking forward to that. And, here I am kind of, done with college, launching into the real world. And I wanted to be around like-minded people and who would also, fuel my calling to missions too. And so I knew CMC, was a headquarter, founding church for KCM. So, and knowing that Pastor Jimmy was there, that was another big draw for me. I'm like, okay, he's going to help me grow and just stay in the, just in how he waters and how he does ministry with intention. So I was eager and I was excited. So I didn't search very long. I just went. I was like, I think I'm going to stay here and worship here at CMC.
But you went to CMC from LA, right? Weren't you living in LA?
I was. I was,
wow.
Living in Glendale initially at that time.
Uh-huh.
And while I was at CMC, I ended up moving to LA much later. But yeah.
So you're commuting from LA to CMC.
Yeah, about 3 times a week. And so, but it was well worth it. I look forward to going.
When you were growing up in KCF and then going to Chunghyun, and this is kind of the beginning of EMs and Korean Americans now forming actual gatherings and congregations. Because it was kind of the beginning, did you know like the Jimmy Hans and then the John Kims, like that first wave? Did you know? Because there couldn't be very many. So were you aware of these other kind of English speaking pastors that are starting to like form these groups?
Yes. I heard their names. I heard a lot of things. And when I went to, like either KCM send-off services and, or there at OMC, there was something called Come to Me, Come and See back in the day in the 80s and 90s. And then when I used to go to those, these pastors will come and speak. So I was made aware of actually John Kim and Ben Shin. It was a long time ago when I was a middle schooler at OMC.
Whoa.
Okay. And we had, I want to say it was Come to Me. And I think that was fostered by the high school. And so I was in middle school, but I went and I sat in the front with a friend and I was excited. And these 2 guys led worship. And I was intrigued because one guy had 12-string guitar and I'd never seen it.
Wow.
And the sound was wow. It was so full and so pretty. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. But they sang songs like, I like papayas. I'm like, what in the world? What is going
Old
on?
school.
Whatever happened to Jesus? But I like papayas. I know that mango's sweet. And then they sang King Jesus is All with like really funky rhythm, like offbeat. I'm like, wow, this is different, kind of weird. Turns out that it was John Kim and the guy with 12-string was Ben Shin. And I didn't figure that out until much later when I was dating Ben. Like that was him.
They were in college at the time? Or high school?
Probably post-college.
Okay.
Yeah, college or post-college.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that Pastor Ben is a rock star. He plays guitar and he used to lead worship and stuff. So what a funny story. That's a great story. Yeah. At CMC, because I used to be a Chondosa there, that's where I started actually in my pastoral ministry. You are beloved at CMC. People remember you. All the Chanunims and the Chinese wives. I remember there was a long time ago, you were there, you and Pastor Ben were there. It was like I think it was like 30th anniversary.
Yes.
And I saw you and I remember seeing you and everyone's, oh my goodness, and everyone's coming to you and stuff like that. And so how did you build such a close relationship with the Korean speaking congregation there to a point where they adore you? They still love you so much. What was that like? How did you do that?
Yeah, I am so fortunate to have landed at CMC. And I love them too, but I think they love me more, or they really embraced me. And to this day, I call CMC, I don't know if you know this, but 친정 교회. 친정 is like a home before marriage. So your primary home, right? Your first home, basically. Yeah. So that's my 친정 교회. I've not felt other connections like other churches like I had at CMC. So with that, even when I go back now, some of the 권사님s and 장로님s have passed, but it feels like, they embrace me and, I love being there. for the most part, to answer your question, just being in the church, just interacting with them, weekdays, in the late evenings when I would go, I was part of a Bible study at church or, with our cell group. But sometimes I would linger on, or if I had the opportunity to go earlier, there's somebody, 권사님, 집사님, somebody in the kitchen all the time, engage with them, talk with them. And then they would offer to eat with them. And so do that and you just get to know them. And just constant rubbing arms, just, talking to them, being with them. When there were like KM events or worship, I attended because I thought it was very valuable. Yes, I'm an English speaker and I was part of the EM, which was Living Water Ministry led by Pastor Jimmy Han. But I felt that I benefited so much. So I went and I was part of that and I was blessed. During those times, 전 명자 집사님 at that time, she was one of the pioneer leaders for KCM when it started. She worked closely with 석 목사님. She was a very key female leader at the church too. And she actually mentored me. She says, let's meet. I want to spend time with you. And one of the things I learned so much from her is how to kind of, relate with KM and EM, like first and second generation. We talked about that a lot. And she kind of schooled me on it. She gave me her thoughts and feedbacks. And she wanted to really reach out to the younger folks too, to the EMers, to, second generation. And she was so open to, learn about what we were thinking. How is it out in the real world for you and so forth. And so learning from 집사님 that way also helped me to have such a positive outlook in, KM. And they're like my uncles and aunties anyway. So for me, it was just more forms and more mode for me to be blessed by. So yeah, I think CMC did quite a bit in really trying to foster that, where 석 목사님 launched a worship where the worship was going to be done in Korean and English. And of course, guess who the English speaker was? Pastor Jimmy. And so, and then they did that together for a time period. And it didn't last long, but there was good effort into it because it was predominantly KM speakers, not EM speakers. But it was, they were making a lot of effort to embrace us and bring us together. And so I loved it. And probably one thing another big thing would be being a missionary for CMC. And they prayed for me. They really embraced me and they were concerned for me. And they were always rooting for the mission work at hand. And so I think when you pray for somebody so long and so intensely, I think God gives you that extra layer of love and embrace for that person. And so I wonder if that's what, created that strong love for me in that way.
When you said 전 집사님, I want to confirm, are you talking about Mrs. Jun who teaches math at Cerritos High?
No.
Okay.
But I know, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Because she used to be one of my elementary teachers when I was there. Okay.
Yes.
So I was just wondering about that.
Matthew and Elizabeth's mom, right?
Yes. And her husband is a 청년님 there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it's not her.
Amazing people.
Yeah.
Amazing people.
Yeah.
But this is another 전 집사님.
Okay.
Yes.
I love them. I know.
Me
I
too.
love them. So, okay. It sounds like what you're saying is you made an effort, a step forward to really try to reach out to them and build a relationship. You said you rubbed elbows with them. And it sounds like what you're saying, the more you did that, the better understanding you had for first gen KM.
Yes.
What would you say to my generation or to third generation who's like, I don't want to reach out to them. They don't know me. They don't understand us. How would you encourage Korean Americans today to do that more?
I don't think you have to be part of everything with KM. Or let's say if you go to church apart from your parents, and if your parents are at a Korean church and you're elsewhere, at least kind of show up for, some of the significant events of their church, either their church celebration, anniversary celebration, or if there is, like elder installation. And if you're, of course, just make it a point to visit and just see them more regularly and show up for those functions and, and just engage. And, our third generation has so much to offer, so bright, so resourceful. Sometimes, the KM and the first generation, they need help in that way. And just engage and see, and be attentive and see what the needs are. And maybe God is calling you to do something simple as to help them with their phone or help them set up something online, because it comes so easily to the younger generations. However, in older generations, we're challenged in that. And just looking for opportunities to see how you could serve them.
You have a really big missions experience. You went to Guatemala, and then at CMC, you went to Mexico. How long did you go to Mexico for?
With CMC, it was a year.
Okay, so one whole year at the Mexico mission site, right?
Yes.
Where we all used to go to for KCM training back in the day. I remember that site. Why did you want to devote a year of your life to Mexico? And you were by yourself, right? Over there.
Yes.
Why did you want to do that?
Initially, I was called to missions after KCM missions, 92. And God's really started to open doors for me in this way. And around that time, I want to say around 98, while I was at CMC, I was actually looking into going to Paraguay. There was a group of missionaries there established, and they had their own community. They were running a school. They had a seminary, and it was just part of a good foundation. And I was looking into going there. And Sang Moksa님, who was a KM pastor and the founding pastor of KCM, he said, "What are you doing these days?" I'm like, "Oh, ne." And I told him that I was praying to go to that community and to receive training and to learn and maybe serve in the capacity that I can. And he redirected me. He says, "No, you need to go to our mission center. You need to go to Mexico." And so he redirected me. And, I struggled with it because I didn't want to be on my own. I felt like I wasn't ready to stand on my own on the missions field by myself and just kind of leading the charge there. And I said, "Muksa님, I'm not ready for this." And he says, "God will do the work, you just obey." That was so Muksa님. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could. But in all honesty, God gave me heart of peace in going there over time. It took some time for me to come to that point after prayer, for a long time. And we were there. I didn't want to be alone at the mission center. And at that time, mission center was not fully built either. It was half done. It's very different from what it looks now. There's cancha, the play area, and there's one building, and it's 2 stories high, but it was missing a rooftop. So it's half built, really. Yeah. And when it rained, oh man, it got nasty. It got dirty. Everything came in. We had a lot of critters living in the, building. So, I had few assignments to be done while I was there. So that's how I ended up in Mexico.
Now, when someone hears what you just said, I feel like some might be thinking that's messed up. Why did he make you go to Mexico? Did he force you? Do you feel like he forced you, kind of using that power or that first gen kind of culture persuasion? Some people might think oh yeah, that you should have gone to Paraguay. That's where you wanted to go. Mm-hmm. Do you feel kind of a little bit of that happened? It was kind of pressured into it?
Initially, I felt that pressure, but over time with prayer and reconsideration, and God gave me a sense of peace with that. And in fact, Muksa님 really empowered me, and he said, "You know what? You've been trained for all these things. You can do this." And he also gave me support from the church we will, get behind you with this. But I want you to, be good about it. And he goes, I think you can easily do this. I doubted myself, but really in the long run, I think God really showed up to, lead me and guide me. And I think there was some good in obedience too on my part. And maybe I did that better than, something else. So yeah, God used it for good. There was a lot of challenges though.
What were some of those challenges? Because just thinking about being a year by myself, even for me, being a year by myself in Mexico, I think I would be like, I can't do that. So what were some of the major challenges for you?
So my biggest challenge was I can't go alone at this big mission center, and how will I be safe?
You're right.
I'm single, I'm young, and that's a culture, very, very family oriented culture. And so, they're going to see me, why are you here by yourself? So I asked Muksa님 if he could find somebody to, that I could have a partner to work with. So I don't have to worry about security and safety. And so he ended up hiring a Mexican 전도사님 from Mexico with his wife and their baby, Fernandito. They came and lived on the mission center. And so that kind of alleviated the, stress of, being alone and the security. So he was there with his family, but we're pretty much doing our own thing. And so we will partner at times to do things. But my assignment was to start a school, also to oversee the roof work, the construction work. So while I was there, they were finishing up the construction. I also needed to work with the lawyer, Abogado, Rodolfo, it was his name. And I had to meet him periodically because the church was trying to get a church license for the mission center, but that wasn't working out. So we had to change to a school where we would serve the locals there and serving as like a community center, but also, to meet their needs. So, figuring that out and I placed myself after being there, I realized, what, this place needs this more than anything else. A good working relations with the community. Because when I went there, the natives called us, Escuela Coreana, School of Koreans. Because why? Because all these Koreans were coming to, the mission center. So, I had to press them and say, well, this is your school, not Korean school. And we're not here to, teach anything that we want to teach you, but I want to know what you want to learn. So over that time, they wanted to learn English. They wanted to learn computer. So we started that. We had Sunday worship, which I led. And it was predominantly, students and younger kids. We did that. And also I actively engaged with the community where I went to teach English at the Escuela Primaria, elementary, and Escuela Secundaria, the middle school. So I served them every week teaching English. I had a time slot to go in. And also to find a good working relationship with the pioneer Korean missionary in Tijuana, Lee Sung-gyu-sa님. And he's been there many, many decades. And in fact, when I was single, I visited him and kind of supported his mission work way, way before I landed at, in Primo Tapia, Mexico Mission Center. And I asked him, and because he helped with our mission center and all the dynamics of, finding the legality and whatnot. And so he also wanted me to come teach English at his mission center. So I think it was Wednesday evenings or Tuesday, I would drive out to Tijuana and teach English and then drive back to Rosarito City, which was in Primo Tapia.
Were you planning on being a full-time missionary? Was that kind of your trajectory? Okay, you were.
Yes. So
what happened? Why did you not pursue that as a overseas full-time missionary?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So my first KCM mission trip, went to Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, Philippines, and Thailand. And when I came back, God really moved me to commit myself to the mission work. And so I said yes. And from then on, and this is around the time when I went to Chunyan, God really, I felt the Lord kind of guiding me in that trajectory. And so with that mindset, I said, okay, I'm going to finish college and go to mission field. And so however God will teach me and guide me. And so I was praying for that, for opportunities. And so it did come about. Went to Guatemala with Chungyan. And then that summer, I also went to World Mission Conference in Korea. It was at Hanyang University. And so it was a week-long program in the middle of monsoon season. It was very uncomfortable.
Oh, no.
And but I learned a lot. And just catching on the Korean diaspora, and, Koreans going out to the uttermost parts of the world to share the gospel of the good news of Jesus. And so that, and I ended up in Korea much after that conference because my dad was relocating to Korea. And so just kind of being there, and somehow one of my uncles who's a pastor connected me to another pastor in Seoul. And he asked me if I would, help him with the denomination with this and this and this, because they're hosting a big, AWF, Alliance World Federation of like missionaries worldwide. And this is a holiness group. And so went to do some work, translation, and a lot of, administrative work. And while I realized, why am I here? And then so I remember how God reminded me of this picture when I was after my sophomore year with my friend in our, apartment, college years. I prayed that, God, since you called me to missions, help me to have opportunities to serve you. For example, when I graduate from college, would you give me an opportunity to serve you for 6 months somewhere to learn about, being a missionary? And then that picture came into my mind when I was praying. And I thought, wow, this is it. This is God's answer to prayer, but it happened to be in Korea. And the thing is, I didn't set the term. Kim Moksa님, who was head of the denomination and the church that I was serving with, he said, can you just stay for 6 months? And I agreed. And then he introduced me as 선교사님. And I thought, wow, this is weird, but everything just lined up as God had kind of revealed. Anyway, with that, served and then came back, and I was preparing for another trip, and so therefore I was looking into Paraguay, but I got redirected to Mexico, went for a year, and when I came back, I actually got really sick. I had ulcer. I was really I was bedridden for like almost 5-6 months.
Oh.
I couldn't even hold down juk, Korean porridge, and it was really bad. So I recovered from that, and soon after, I was serving at the church again and whatnot, and when I was least expecting, God brought Ben into my life, and so met Ben, and we started to just kind of meet each other because he's very careful, and so am I. And so we DTR'd a little bit later, months later. But when DTR was done, I realized, oh boy, our calling is so different. Yes, we're both believers, we're serving the Lord, but he's called to be here at the church and at the seminary. I'm called to the field. And I was very, confused. And so committed to prayer for a while. And at the end of that prayer, God gave me a sense of comfort, saying, you know what? It's not about where you serve. It's about who you serve, and you're serving me. And along with a team of friends and family members who were praying for me, everybody felt that this was God's will for me to be with Ben and to stay. intriguing because, and then so I was at ease and I was dating Ben. We got married and church ministry. And so looking back, I think how God had just journeyed with me that decade of my time. I thought I was serving the Lord in mission field. I think He's almost trained me to be a Samo in that way. Because my 6 months of that time in Korea, wow, I learned so much about first gens, how 목사님's function, what it entails to be in the church and being a church leader. I learned so much. And the Korean dynamic, I made a lot of mistakes too. So I learned from my mistakes with my rubbing them the wrong way too, and culturally at the same time. And so I'm a little bit more, I think, knowledgeable, now than going into it back then.
Hey, real quick, thank you so much for watching. If you're finding value in this content, can you please support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, selecting all on the notification bell, or write a comment down below. All 4 of these things helps our channel get pushed out more on YouTube homepages so that more people can find this value. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. Something happened that at the end of your Mexico mission trip where when you were coming back, I don't know if it was miscommunication, but you came back and I guess no one knew that you were returning. And the story, correct me if I'm wrong, goes something like this. You came back and no one was there to like pick you up at the airport. And there was no like welcome back because they didn't even know you were there. So you came back alone. And obviously that's not a very good way of transitioning back. So how did you feel when that happened? And like, what happened? Why did you come back and no one knew? What went wrong there?
So surprised that you know this, John. Okay. Wow. Okay. Let me kind of take a step back with that. Where I was, although in city of Rosarito, which is only a full hour drive from the border, from Tijuana, it's only an hour. And we're city of Rosarito, but in Ejido Primo Tapia. And it's a newly developed like area at that time. And I was there since April 1999 and all the way till 2000. And while I was there, there was no running water. There's no telephone line. There's no mail system. We had electricity though. That's the only thing that was going for us. And during those times, we didn't have a clear communication. So that was a big challenge. And so I had to rely on like maybe every other month, somebody would come from CMC, like bringing me like packages, maybe, letters from somebody or some support of some food. And they brought a lot of kimchi down for me. And then so and that person, we will be like the mailman, kind of like, we send message back and forth. And at KM level, 장로님s came down every so often to rest and, just to encourage me and come pray for me. And 성 목사님 came every so often with the 장로님s and so forth. And so when I was coming back, I think we communicated. We knew. They knew. And I think I also, Pastor Peter Ma at that time was at church doing youth group at that time. And so he was another key person of like all the information that, flowed. And we had another 장로님, 정수ung 장로님. He was overseeing missions. He's now 목사님. And he would, bring a lot of information back and forth. So he knew. At that time, I had a small church, like mini, like hatchback Dodge car. It was white. It's like a small car. So I drove that around the, area in Mission Field and I drove it back and forth. And so when I came back up, my car was loaded with all my belongings and all that. And I drove into a church parking lot, parked my car, and then I walked into, the church foyer area, right? Walking in. And I think EM worship had just ended, because people were out and I could see that they were kind of mingling and fellowshipping. And then I looked and then I was just looking for, I guess, I don't know, somebody. But I didn't recognize majority of the people, these wave of new, probably mostly collegiates, coming into English ministry. And then in the distance, I saw Pastor Jimmy. And then he saw me and his jaw dropped. He went, he did this. And I realized, oh, he forgot.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so, so I was surprised too, but I don't think the disappointment didn't hit me until later, But at the same time, I do want to say that I was sent by KM and EM, but I think the role between KM and EM, they were kind of confused. Who's going to take ownership of sending Jen? And to the church defense, it was KM's first missionary that they sent off. And I was their first missionary, like going for more than 6 months to the field, supported like in the church name and to a church site in Mexico. And so there was that confusion between KM and EM leadership. I guess it is what it is. But at that time, I was, oh, okay. It was okay. But it hit me later. Next week I realized, wait a second, that was my coming back. And they didn't remember it. And I was forgotten. And then that just kind of, wow, I see. So there was some disappointment and pain. And so that lingered for a while. But I did have a really good talk with Pastor Jimmy, and he really conveyed his care and love for me. So, I love Pastor Jimmy and Jen, and, we been longtime friends. And so, yeah.
just thinking about that though, that must have been so difficult. I would have been so disappointed and wrecked. Like no one remembered and no one welcomed me back. Oh my goodness. That must have been extremely difficult for you when you said it hit you later.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What in your mind, again, you have this great experience that even a lot of EM pastors don't really have, where you got to actually serve with Korean speaking congregation, attend Korean speaking congregation, now attend an English speaking congregation, and all the different churches that you've been at. You've been a part of multiple churches. Most of these churches are actually very well known. What in your mind were kind of the most largest challenges with first generation when you were trying to do English ministry, especially as you're getting into the late 90s and 2000s, that's now, we're getting really distant from like 1.5ers, 1.8. This is like now mostly second gen. They don't really speak Korean that well, So as you're kind of now getting into that phase of English ministry, what were kind of the biggest challenges with the first gen?
I have some stories on that, but I guess I would say, kind of seeing the transition from early onset I had different expectation, but even in the recent last 2 decades of EM-KM dynamic, I feel as though there was slight disconnect with KM, where this is 애들 예배. You understand that term, right? And the thing is, that was something I really wanted. I was hoping that they would change that attitude. And for us, like, where we're always forever seen as their children. It doesn't matter how old we are, right? Like my father-in-law, who's 93, my husband, almost 60, he still treats him like a little child, like his baby. And we're thinking, oh, 아버님, we're adults now, So it's kind of embedded. And I'm thinking about that and why that happens. And I think that kind of carries over into our KM, EM, mold, where KM is concerned for the EM. I wonder if they're going to, and so forth. I think things have progressed a lot more recent, decades. But even, 2 decades ago, I felt that pull quite strongly. For example, so this is when Ben and I were in ministry, married like mid 2000s. We're having worship service, and this is a chapel where KM will use also. later after us, and we had morning service at 9:30. And this is right in the middle of Ben's message on the pulpit, and the altar was very clear. It's like it had steps leading up to it. He's up there preaching, and in the middle of it, a KM person, a male, he walked on the stage with like a 7 or 8 foot ladder, and he climbed up right behind Ben. As Ben is preaching, he decided to change the light bulb.
Oh my God.
It was very humorous at one point, but on the other point, it was very disturbing.
Oh my God.
So I'm sitting there just watching this. You couldn't wait, huh?
Yeah.
And I don't know, what does that convey to you? For me, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. And so those moments are telling like, what does our worship, what does that look to you, to them, to him? What did that look like? But it sounded like he needed to get it done. He was told to do it. And I have another situation where, still during worship, people just come in and come take what they need. And that was, I'm thinking, this is 예배 중. I need to put a Korean sign saying 예배 중입니다. And that happens. And just recently I experienced this where before our worship, pastor and team of, worship team and, people who are involved with worship, we pray. And so we're praying. And in the middle of prayer, somebody came and tugged on my arm. And so I had to open and look. And it was one of the KM leaders coming to me saying, I need you to come do something. And I said, okay. And I thought, wow, they couldn't wait. They needed to stop me from prayer. And it was obvious. It wasn't just me. A lot of us praying in a circle. And, these things just I keep wondering, I'm like, it could be just that person. But maybe it's just a mentality, I hope and I wish that there will be some mutual respect and, okay, 영어 예배, yes, my children are part of that, but they need to see it more than just that and understand that this is worship and it needs to be revered. And you need to just give us that time of, adoration to God. And so those things kind of really, got me thinking quite a bit about like, where's this coming from?
Man, those are some wild stories. I know Pastor Ben in his podcast shares some wild stories as well. And so it's just unbelievable, very unbelievable. There's something I'm very interested in because as a samonim, you got to experience and observe Gen X Korean Americans, Millennial Korean Americans, and now Gen Z Korean Americans. I'm very curious on what do you observe happening in these generations, but not just even what you observe. I'm also very curious and specific about what are some things that you really feel like these are things that we need to fix and change? Like they're like things that you feel like we have to address some of these things because there are problems with us too. So in those 3 generations, as you have been in ministry as a samonim, mentoring so many different women, what are some of those observations that you noticed?
I think the first generations are like the trailblazers, they paved the way for us and they sacrificed so much. And, starting church, starting, faith life in the state, in a, country where they're not familiar with having to start. And second generation, and that would be probably more closer to me. And, we had the privilege of, just working from our first generation's fruit and their labor. And we're so privileged to, run the race and at the same time stay, focused in the vision that, God has called us in the immigrant church and, EM being the, part of the immigrant church, right? That's what we're part of. And for us to just persevere I think is a good word. And to learn not just two cultures, Korean culture and American culture, but also, and how to work well together. And yes, there is, some tension at times. I don't think it's that serious, but also to kind of, work that out and persevere. And sometimes I feel Ben mentioned something about understanding, right? The both cultures, and I think that's so valuable. And if I could kind of, build on that, I would say, listen well. Listen to what they have to say and why, because they have good reasoning. And I wish that would be reciprocated back, and for our first gen to understand, the second generation in that way, to listen well and to build together. Because after all, this is one big church, we're serving one Lord. And with that, persevere in that. And for, third generation, probably for my kids, I want to say, um, I think they've gotten the best of everything, really. And now, like K-pop is such a segue for them to open their eyes to Korean culture, because they probably think they're, not Koreans. They think they're pure American. They say, no, you are Korean American. And so they get that now. And still there's a lot of pull for my boys too. And I want to just encourage the third generation to really, find their identity in Christ. And, whether it means Koreanness or, something else, understand that your roots are important, but, be creative in how you, come about. So for example, I would say first, second, third generation is just a big, massive tree. It started at the form of a root and it truncated and then it's branching off and in many, many branches, in fact. And for our third generation to now be at the tip of the branch, they're at a prime place to be fruitful. And the labors that the first two generations have paved along the way, that they will also learn from them, listen to their stories, and to hear, oh, so what part do I have in that, and so forth, and while being creative. And I think third gen is immensely resourceful, intelligent, very savvy, and they can do whatever they want if they put their mind to it. And I think God will bless them for that. But really utilizing whatever that has been formed and how they have been developed, even in society, that they would focus on really how will this benefit serving God? How will this benefit, in the bigger picture of the church and serving the church? I think that will be something that comes from my heart, and just being attentive to those things.
Those are really great thoughts. Such great observations there. Growing up as a female in the Korean church, I feel like there wasn't, except for that example you gave from John Ji from CMC, but more of Korean American. I feel like there wasn't a lot of Korean American female mentors and coaches. As you were growing up, whether you were in college, post-college, even in your young adult years, how did you find like mentors and coaches? Like, what did you do when you were really in need of like a woman leader, especially in a Korean church where, in our culture, it's not very common to have a lot of Korean female leaders. So what did you do to try to find that in your life?
So I mentioned earlier at CMC, 전 집사님 approached me and said, let's have lunch. Let's have, coffee. And so that's how she approached me and said, I want to mentor you. Let's spend some time. And so that's how it happened for me. That was my first mentorship from 전 집사님. And that I learned so much, and I embraced that we're still in touch. After that, there's older sisters, who speak into your lives, who care for you. in the loving ways as a believer. And it wasn't until the next big mentorship I had was through Ben's connection. Walt and Marty, Dr. Walt Russell, he is, Ben's, professor and then colleague. He also married us. And he's like a spiritual father figure to me in that way. I adore him. He recently passed away. His wife, Marty, also reached out. And so she mentored me. And I felt until like second, third time of meeting, I realized, oh my goodness, she is God sent. And for me to kind of acclimate myself into topic community, she really, really helped me with that. And I didn't have too much besides like work, like at schools in those capacities. I didn't have too, close relationship with working closely with, white folks and Walt and Marty. Yeah, that was huge. So that was Marty who, really walked with me and they care for us, especially in our ministry when it was tough. I also have to say that, seek for people in your church. And in those times, like after our LA Open Door ministry, and when Ben stepped away from ministry and we were just, worshiping at YNCC, Young Knox Celebration Church. And, there's a lot of older people, a lot of peers, a lot of, people in general. And it was during those times where somehow I got connected with KJ Park, Pak Gwangja 전도사님, and she was more known for a missionary in Brazil. And so she pretty much served at Yongnak pretty much all her life with the founding pastor of Yongnak at that time. Went to missions, and then when she came back, she served as an education director at Yongnak for a long time, and went to Japan and served there as missionary, came back. It was in her later years, like about 4 years of her life. I got to spend time with her and just glean a lot of wisdom. And I would say she was one of the mentors of mine where she was battling cancer. And so during those about a year, I just took over food for her and that was such a good segue for me to just care for her in that way and pray for her. And she would, set up and, share stories with me and encourage me being in ministry and tell me funny stories about Ben and all this good stuff. And so another one. And so recently I've been actually engaging with our KM pastor's wife at New Life Vision Church, where we are serving now. And I reached out to 오 사모님 and 강 사모님, and I've met with 오 사모님 quite regularly all last year, pretty much, and just fellowshipped. And 강 사모님 is so accessible, and she's so warm, so wise. They won't say no to you. I think, just ask and say, can I buy you lunch? And just offer that. And, just get to know them and, ask questions, learn from them. And in return, they would so love on you and pray for you. And I've been that recipient of blessing from our KM pastor's wife. And so it's been very rich. Since last year, I want to put a plug in. I've never been part of this, but serving in the Korean church, and of course, we're doing the English ministry, and we're actually independent. Bridge ministry is very independent from NLVC, KM, but we mingle a lot. We do a lot of things together. And since last year, I've been part of the KM Pastor's Wives Fellowship. So we get together every month, and it's been very rich. We just share about life, highs and lows, and we pray together, and we end with a nice meal. And so that's been very recharging for me. I have not experienced that being in ministry as pastor's wife the last almost 19 years now, I haven't experienced that. So this has been it's been just treasure. So yeah, we have another one coming in 2 weeks. I would say if you're seeking mentorship, pray, God will bring somebody to your mind. And I don't think you necessarily have to, find somebody who's far. Find somebody at your local church. There's got to be somebody. There's God's people everywhere. And, prayerfully, approach God and He will respond. And just have to ask, say, would you mentor me? I want to learn about, how to navigate myself in ministry as a leader in the church, as a pastor's wife. Give some specifics and, and ask what they think about it. If they're available, they will, I think, most likely to do that.
There's a lot of books about pastors, pastoral leadership. I don't know of any books about pastors' wives, but I think even more specifically than that, there needs to be a book, I think, for Korean pastors' wives. There's a different sphere of challenges that comes along with that, with our Korean culture. So what would you say to other 사모님s? Or what are kind of the challenges that 사모님s deal with? You're doing the Pastors' Wives Fellowship right now. And so what are those common things that keep on coming up? Or just, I know you meet with a lot of different 사모님s too. What are those common challenges, and how would you encourage, or what would you tell to 사모님s out there to really start thinking about, encourage them, to strengthen them, even to kind of challenge them? What would you say?
I would say for the pastor's wife to not necessarily do everything that the husband is doing. We're not wired that way. And that's not what we're called. But our primary role is to complement and support the husband, which means I have to be available for my husband, who is the pastor, and hear him out and just support him in his journey in ministry, right? After all, that's why I'm around. I'm his wife, right? So I need to find that role and make that very definitive, that I am there for you, my husband, Ben. I am your biggest supporter. That's number one. And I think second one is, finding your gifting. How has God wired you as a believer, as a follower of Christ? And if there's a passion that really pulls you, focus on that. And you don't necessarily have to, be most active at church and do everything, but find one specific thing that your heart, runs for. And, stick with it and serve the Lord in that capacity. I think, there's, pastors' wives who sit on camps like, well, my husband is, doing a lot, so I don't want to be too, visible. I get that. But after all, if you're getting your sheep, your flock to serve the Lord and actively grow in Christ as a, body of Christ, at the leadership level, we need to model that. Means you don't have to do everything, but just do one thing that your heart is after. And whether that is, serving in the women's fellowship, whether that is just being part of a community group and maybe you're, really fostering that growth, or whether it's worship team, whether it's just heart for missions and for your, engaging with missionaries that way. Whatever that might be. And for myself, I'm serving in the women's ministry at our church. And that's been like my primary focus. And so find your personal calling in the church ministry, kind of apart from pastor's wife's role. And I think that should be good. After all, we have a personal relationship with our Lord, right? And what He calls us. So it should be fun. It should be exciting. It should be worthwhile and passionate to, wholeheartedly serve. So
in these past couple of years, there were some scary moments with Pastor Ben. Not only scary moments, but extremely challenging moments. There was the church in El Monte. I know that was a very difficult time transitioning out of there. And then you transition out of Open Door. And then I think a couple of years ago, Ben had like this anxiety attack. We all thought it was a heart attack. So that was really scary. What was that like for you to experience not only hardship in ministry? I know that first church, Ben had to get counseling, all that stuff. It was extremely difficult. And then, but even the health complication, that must have been super scary. What was that like for you? How did you get through that time?
So when Ben was at LA, this is when we were engaged. This takes us almost 20 years back now. And right around that, even before I asked, wow, he was so faithful to his church, because at that time he had served at LA for 15 years. And I said, just to kind of have a little fun and tease him, I said, well, under what condition would you leave a church? And he said, oh, I don't plan to, unless I die or God really fires me or pulls me out. I'm like, oh, okay. It's crazy. It happened on Christmas Sunday. And so we were already engaged. And so we were worshiping, and he had already encountered an elder, and he said, okay, thanks. It was nice to have you here. And that was his dismissal. And he lost memory. He had panic attack. He got upset. He had road rage, which he didn't have before. His body, he's emotionally, mentally, he was just shutting out, because that's one church he loved and he was not planning on leaving. And it was very quick for the elder to dismiss him. And so he was frantic. And so he did get Christian counseling, and counselor asked me to come in to just support him, because we were engaged, and just support him in that way. And that kind of transitioned into our, premarital counseling too, which was good. It was hard. Ben was completely removed, and he didn't want anything to do with Korean ministry at that time. So this is going into our marriage. And so that's why during those times, Walt and Marty had such pivotal impact on our lives at that time. And then first year of marriage, we went to Lake Avenue Congregational in Pasadena, where we lived. And while we were there, we were just taking in everything, being really replenished. I felt the Lord really calling us at that time. Ben was absolutely no way. I'm not going back to Korean church again, ever. And for me, I thought, oh, what a waste. What a waste. God taught him so much, and he's gained so much, KM, EM, directives and knowledge on this. It would be such shame if he not had anything to do with KM. So secretly, I prayed on my own. It's like, God, would you tend to him and redeem him from this? And would you call him back to Korean church? And so, God is amazing how he kind of orchestrates all this. Right at the end of our 1 year mark of our marriage, and at Lake Avenue, God called Ben to KM. So that's how he was, invited to go to Open Door, LA Open Door, EM. And so it was amazing how he was healed from that. When he had that attack, this is in the heart of his, he's full-time at, Talbot. He was part-time at the church, but always doing full-time load. There's no part-time pastor, you know that, right? It's part-time pay designation. And in fact, we were both giving so heartily to the church. And he was tired, and he was writing his dissertation at that time. And we were doing premarital counseling. We had people over all the time, Bible study all the time. We were just going fast for too long. And to me, what it looked like, he was having a heart attack. He couldn't breathe. He put his hand on his chest, and he was sweating bullets, coin-sized bullet size of sweat, and his color was changing. I'm like, oh my goodness. And my dad passed away from heart attack, so I know what that looks like. So he was tended. He had to rest, and that was a sign for us to rest and slow down. So God was really good to give us that reminder. So we, stepped down from LA Open Door at that time. We really needed to rest. Running too fast for too long with so much intensity. A couple years ago, he had another one, 2 summers ago. But this was stress attack. And the first one was not a heart attack. It was acid reflux, it turns out. But he had the same symptoms of heart attack. And just recently, he needs to take care of himself. And he's on blood pressure meds now. That's what it was. He had high blood pressure. Trying to, just help him asking him to slow down. Sometimes I ask him to not do too much. And he loves to do ministry. He loves to help people. He really does. He has the heart for all pastors. And so he wants to meet with them, talk to them, counsel them, and, just have fun with them. Even so, I've been kind of like holding him back. I said, you need to think about yourself. We need you to be here for a while. Zachary's only 13 now. Now he's 14, but it just has to, and I'm trying to help him slow down and, go strong at certain areas where it really counts. He calls me manager, but I don't know. 말도 안 들어 at times, So, I know his heart is for the local church. And so he lives for that. And so I know that I can't stop him. Yeah, we pray. I pray for him. And, our circle of friends and family pray for Ben for his effectiveness. And KM Church and EM, we're doing ministry at the EM level. And he's still, full-time at Talbot. And he's doing what he can to make an impact for God in the name of Jesus. So I pray for that every day. And for his health is another big thing. For him to be healthy, to have longevity in ministry.
Here at the school, we're trying to do this English M.Div with the goal of building that healthy bridge between first and second gen.
Mm-hmm.
Different classes, and we're going to have student fellowship between both the programs. But hopefully we'll get Korean-speaking pastors and then English-speaking pastors from the same church coming to the same school.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're learning, we're going to, at the same time, try to help them to build that relationship between each other.
Mm.
When you hear that vision, when you hear that goal, what do you think are some needed things, needed requirements in order for this to work? What needs to happen or need to be created? What do we need to focus on to build that healthy bridge between first and second gen?
In my mind, what tells me is in order to have a good working relationship, fellowship, have a lot of fun with each other. For me, for example, with our KM pastors' wives, there's a lot. About half of them I didn't know very well. I just know them by name, just insa and say, we sang together and this and that. But something that I feel like could break the, barrier or even bring us closer together might be just spending time doing some fun things together. Not necessarily, just having race and just, doing all like Korean Olympics, like Awana type, not those things, but just really laughing together, being together and sharing bulk of time together and, openness and just, just having the availability to just kind of reach out and, care for the family. If they have a young child, you could pass on some, help in that way and just kind of tending to each other. And sometimes there's that element where they're burdened with something, really, bearing one another's burden in that way. And when they see you more as a team versus another ministry, having different vision, and when there's a personal connection there, I think it's more readily they will, embrace my vision even if it's different, and be supportive and vice versa. And maybe, I'm realizing this at, this point of my life, but I wish I had done that with our previous KM, pastors and their wives, or we would do lunch, we would hang out and just occasionally go do something fun and, and have segue to talk about just life and be prayerful about that. I wish there was very meaningful fellowship that would bring us together and then everything else, it'll just kind of build from that, I think.
So I'm going to ask you this question. It's going to be a little embarrassing. So I'm going to let you know here, just prep your mind. But as a college student, we knew who you were, but we knew who you were as the one that every Korean pastor was trying to woo you. We knew you as the one that they were like, oh, Jen, who's going to be able to win Jen's heart? This is how we all thought. And even it came from KM adults. They're like, oh, like Jen is the one that we all want our sons to marry. And as a college student at KCM, this is how we knew you. We're like, wow, I wonder who's going to get Jen's heart. And so as we knew that, we knew everyone was trying to woo you. How did Pastor Ben woo you? How did he win your trust and win your heart? How did that happen?
Oh, man. Are you sure you have the story right?
Yes, I have the right story. Yes.
Oh, man. So I think you're talking about CMC context then.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
When they love you, they don't see any wrong in the person, And so I am the recipient of their prayers. And, I knew a handful of 권사님s and few of them passed away. They would pray for me as I was on the mission field, but they also prayed for my 배우자, my significant other who I would settle down with. And then they pray for 목사님 for me. And she goes, and they said, 선교사님, 기도하고 있습니다. 하나님이 목사님 주실 거예요. I'm like, 네? And I was thinking, 그냥 선교사님이면 돼요. And she goes, 아니야, 선교사님도 목사님이어야 돼요. And so they would tell me these things, and I know they were praying for me. Thanks to their prayer and, God listening to their... I didn't know all that, but long story short, I guess Ben, he's come to CMC so many times through Pastor Jimmy's contact, and he would come preach, and he would come, he came so many times, especially more for, I think, KCM than our EM at that time. And, wow, he taught Bible so clearly. I left, the chapel thinking, wow, that was so clear. I had no questions. And so I was so blessed by him. And so every time I always wanted to go thank him, a little bit shy, but, when I decided to go and thank him, he had a swarm of people around him and the people waiting to talk. I'm like, okay, another time. And so I said another time many times under that, scenario. And when I met him, it was at Living Way Community Church. This is where my sister was part of a ministry. She was one of the,
Kelly.
Pioneer leaders with Pastor James Yim. And at the church, Ben had consulted the ministry for quite some time. And my sister Kelly knew how much I loved Pastor Ben, how he presented the message. And so, hey, Pastor Ben's, preaching and in our fall retreat, why don't you come? So I did. So I went and I actually met him and shook hands, but we both knew of each other and said hello, introduced ourselves. And so that was beginning of our first initial meeting, and I'll save you all the stories. But later on, when we started meeting and dating, I think how he wooed me was how, he's so knowledgeable and he was fun. He was really fun man. And, he has always thought in his mind. if I could probably open his brain, he has like an outline going. He has one after another thoughts going. And, I am not that extroverted. I rather just kind of, I appreciate a smaller group of people, but he can engage with large group. And he was just had so many thoughts. And, and I also felt a strong pull with his ministry where he had heart for the immigrant church. And his heart was to be with the KM and to serve at the EM level. And, at that time, I never went public about that, but that was my call too. And like, I need to be in the immigrant church, serving alongside KM and just, and really, journeying together. And so he kind of crystallized that, not that I asked, but, he revealed that. And yeah. And so when we're dating, before we had the DTR, he definitely said something like, what do you like to do? And do you like sports and so forth? So we went to a Lakers game and we did that. And then he felt comfortable with me, I think, to take me to Monkey's concert.
Mm.
And so I was, blown away by that because I only knew a song or two by the Monkees, but not really, I didn't follow them. And that's another era, right? But it was a lot of fun. And I thought, okay, he had all the basics in what I wanted in a man. And at that time, I prayed for a tall man, meaning, a tall man in two folds, like physically taller than me for one. That was one. But at second level, it was more somebody who I could look up to. Somebody who could really lead me and take the leadership in our marriage, because I think I was on my own for so long, very stubborn, kind of my way, and being the oldest of three siblings, I made the shots, and so at least I thought I did, right? And so with that, I felt like I need to be in that kind of relationship and setting. And upon meeting Ben, it was very plain to see, and it was very clear. And so there's a lot more behind that too, but I will share it another time. Okay.
No, that was great. I've always wanted to ask you that question. That's some good history right there. Well, your boys are in junior high and high school now. Mm-hmm. You guys are at the bridge, living out in do you still Arcadia, right? Still in Arcadia. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Mark Solson now lives next to you guys. I see you guys hanging out. Yes. What's life like now for you? What are you up to these days? Are you listening to BTS? Are you watching Korean dramas on Netflix?
Recently, I haven't had the time to, to do too much. But for now, I'm going through something right now where, God is bringing back some of my old passion, like missions. So I've been trekking and journeying on that. And so I made a trip out to Colorado recently to investigate on that. And everything has not been confirmed, but it's very close to, launching that. So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
God has given me, I think, slowly giving me opportunities. Do you remember that prayer I said earlier? How God said, it's not where you serve, but it's who you serve. Well, I feel like that 20 years was just that. And I wonder if He's going to honor me for His calling to serve in the mission field very soon. Wow. So it's really exciting.
Okay.
And Ben is supportive. And just spending a lot of time just being still before God and just tending to my boys. A lot going on. Soccer, football, volleyball season, lots happening. And youth group for the boys. And, our small group started again in a bridge ministry. So we're leading it. And so we're at church every Wednesday evening. And so just really engaging with our small group. It's been a lot of fun. I love our church people. And so I want to be there for that. And so, family and church.
That sounds great. And I'm so thankful that you're here. One of these days, share the secret hanyak that you give Adam and Zach because they're so tall. I want to give that to all my kids. But thank you so much for being here. It was great spending time with you.
Thank you, John. Blessings.